Hi, I'm Will Russell, a founding partner with Gerard, Nowell and Russell, a public accounting and business advisory firm founded in 2005 and based in Charleston, South Carolina. We at Gerard, Nowell and Russell go beyond traditional accounting roles to work in close partnership with our clients. Many accountants focus solely on financial reporting and tax preparation. The principles at Gerard, Nowell and Russell are different because we are able to draw from extensive experience in public accounting and senior level corporate financial management to provide a more strategic and comprehensive approach to financial and business planning. We work in partnership with clients to analyze, develop, and implement strategies to achieve specific objectives. The firm serves business and individual clients, offering a broad range of services that include business advisory services, consulting for acquisitions and financing, succession planning, and business valuations. We also offer captive insurance consultation, auditing, personal wealth planning, and traditional auditing and tax services. Please visit our website at jnrcpas.com to learn more about us and to schedule a consultation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hi, hope everybody's doing well and you're beating the heat out there. It is quite warm, so I'm glad we're inside in the nice air conditioning. My name is Chris Zeller and I'm our Chief Marketing Officer for the Post and Courier. We welcome you to our third event in our series called Boom and Balance. Boom and Balance is an occasional series that the newsroom does. They've probably done it for the last couple years, and the purpose of it is to really address kind of the explosive growth that is happening in our region and how we can come up with solutions to manage that and talk through that. I was referring to an article that we wrote in July 2018. At the time when we reported that article, it was reported that our region was expected to see 250,000 new people moving here in the next 2 decades, which would push us past 1 million people that live in our beautiful community, which obviously that means homes. We have 28 new people that move here a day. With 105,000 expected homes to be built for this growing community, I was really quite surprised to read all about the permits that are pulled in each of those regions. Can anyone guess how many are for Cainhoy? Just take a guess. What? 500? Anybody want to take another stab at it? 17,781 permits for the Cainhoy plantation. I was shocked when I read that, and then also, we're seeing that in all different areas. It's again the reason why we have the Boom and Balance series. We're happy to take these now through these events. And so we appreciate you all joining the conversation. We have probably about 110, 115 people that have registered for this event. Everyone who registered for this event will also receive a recording of the video. Feel free to share it with those that are interested in this topic. But before we begin today, I want to say thank you to you all for being here and being part of the active conversation. We will have Q&A afterwards. But I also like to thank our sponsor, Gerard, Nowell, and Russell, who helped support this event. Thank you so much. And we're going to begin with a short message from Will Russell, one of the partners. So, Will, you want to join?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. I'm Will Russell, a partner with Gerard, Nowell and Russell. As Chris mentioned, we're an accounting and business consulting firm. Looking forward to today's events and hearing the panelist insight on population growth, development, and how it impacts all of our lives. Like many of you, this is home for me. I grew up in Moncks Corner, live in Somerville. So this Boom and Balance series has been quite interesting so far, and look forward to hearing today from them specific to the Cainhoy region. Gerard and Ellen Russell was formed in 2005. It's based here in Charleston. Our partners and staff try to go beyond traditional accounting roles and work in close partnership with our clients and help them analyze and develop their business strategies to fit their specific needs. Many accountants today focus solely on just traditional accounting and tax. The principles that Gerard and Ellen Russell, along with our staff, are able to focus on a more strategic approach due to our management backgrounds in corporate management, as well as our experience in public accounting. We focus typically on both individual and business. We do audits, captive management, business valuations, other advisory services, personal wealth planning, as well as traditional audit and tax services. Thank you for the Post and Courier again for having this today, and we're proud to sponsor it. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Before I'm going to turn it over now to our moderator, Andrew Miller. Andrew is a business reporter at the Post and Courier, but Andrew, I just learned, has been with us for 32 years. Did I say it right? 32 years. So a lot of 33 years. Thank you for making. So thank you for serving us, and look forward to the conversation. Andrew will introduce our moderators, and here we'll go.
Thanks so much, Chris, and thanks everybody for showing up today. Before I introduce my panelists, and I want to thank all the panelists for showing up today, I want to tell a really quick story. When I started the Post and Courier in 1989, I was a sports writer, and I covered a very young Johnny Cribb and a very young Deon Jackson here. Johnny was a great baseball player for not only Garrett High School, but the Citadel, and then Deon was a star running back for the Citadel back in the day as well. But when I first started here, I ended up doing a story on a guy named Robert Porcher, who's an all-pro defensive end for the Detroit Lions, and he lived out in Cainhoy, and I went out and covered him when he got drafted. He's a first-round draft pick for the Detroit Lions, and I remember talking to him about where he played pickup football, and where he played pickup football was on Clements Ferry Road. Now, this was before 526 came in, and he told me that you would go the whole afternoon and would not see a single car drive up and down Clements Ferry Road. And now you think about that. That was, the mid to late 80s, and how far that region has come and how much growth and development has occurred in Cainhoy. It's just, it is amazing and shocking all at the same time. So let me start out by introducing everybody on the panel. To my immediate left is Johnny Cribb. He's the Berkeley County Supervisor and a friend for more than 3 decades. On his left is Deon Jackson, the Berkeley County School Superintendent, and a very fine running back in his own right. Down there is Marie Delcioppo. She is a former City of Charleston council person. Is that how you like? And was kind of there when Point Hope and the Cainhoy plantation was getting started. And on my far left, last but not least, is Fred Lincoln, who is, in my opinion, the mayor of Cainhoy, and was my personal tour guide through the plantation area that day, and that was just a great experience for me. So I'm going to start just kind of to my left with Johnny Cribb. And Johnny, I think when people think of Cainhoy now, what they think about is, when I think about Clements Ferry Road, because I got to drive up and down that road every single day. And you talk about the Point Hope plant the development that's going to be there. How much infrastructure and what has all gone into developing Clements Ferry that's going to be able to handle all this traffic and all this development that's coming up?
Thank you, Andrew. We did one of these a couple months ago at Nexton, and I was on the very end. And today I'm right beside the principal, so I don't know what I did last time, but I'll try to keep it straight. But the county, as you know, did a 1 penny sales tax referendum in 2008, 2014. It yielded about $370 million. It actually ends this November. Clements Ferry Road is a major infrastructure project that came out of that penny sales tax. Without it, there would be no Clements Ferry Road widening. So phase 1 was 40-something million, and phase 2 was almost 80 million. So 122 million of the 370 million went toward widening of Clements Ferry Road. So it's about a third of the total sales tax program. So a significant infrastructure and investment in that area. If you live in that corridor, and Andrew called me even, when the construction was going on, it was even worse than before the construction started, but once the barrels went away, we were getting lots of calls, lots of positive calls about what it was changing their daily drive, 10, 15 minutes each way in terms of not being in traffic. And now we're on phase 2, and there's barrels everywhere, and you can see the project done, and we're optimistic that when that is done, traffic will flow even better. That being said, there's some significant entitlements out there in that region. So once that project happens, the strain that it'll put on infrastructure on that road will be significant. So it's definitely something on our radar, and some ideas and concepts will be developed in our referendum this November for the voters to consider in the next round.
And one of the things that I was thinking about was that's all county roads, right? I mean, that's not the city of Charleston. That's county, and that can be kind of confusing at times.
There's 1,068 miles of state roads in Berkeley County. There's 330 miles of county roads in Berkeley County. 100% of Clements Ferry Road is a state road. So the county sales tax funding, and there were federal guide share funds and other funding sources that came in, but a lot of what we do is repair on state roads because it's the majority of the roads. And some people think why are y'all doing that? Well, we put out a pretty specific list when we put a referendum out. And the people want you to widen Clements Ferry Road. They want you to widen Henry Round. They want you to widen 176. Without those projects, why vote on the penny? So we try to leverage and get the federal guide share funds and the other funds that we can get. But chances are when we go out and address an intersection or address a road, it's a state road more times than not.
Oh, okay, all right. Deon, I've been out to the Philip Simmons School, that area, and I got to say, those are some of the most beautiful schools that I have seen, probably in the region. Where are they as far as capacity goes? And with 11,000 new homes that are going to be coming in the next couple of decades, what's the plan? Because it doesn't seem to me that there'll be enough schools to hold that many students there. Well, what are the plans for the district?
Absolutely. So, great question, and yes, those are beautiful schools. So at Philip Simmons and then the Point Hope plantation, that area, we've had a unique opportunity to plan for the growth. All three of those schools, the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, were built during our last major building program. And so during our last major building program, we were able to build 6 new schools and several major renovations in order to prepare for the growth that we saw from 2006 till 2011, 2012. And so all three of those schools were complete before any major residential development started taking place at Point Hope. Now, as far as where we stand with respect to capacity, we're well under capacity at those schools. However, given the number of entitlements, we definitely understand that there will be some need for either modifications in which all three of those schools have the footprint to expand upon, or additional sites in which we feel additional sites are imminent. We're currently working with the developer now to identify additional sites when necessary. I'm not going to say if necessary, but when necessary. And so when it is necessary, we will be able to act on it.
One of the schools down there, the Cainhoy School, and the reason I'm so familiar with it, a lot of great football players, Luther Broughton came out of there as well. But what's going to happen with that school, in your opinion?
Well, I can't necessarily answer that question specifically, but we support all of our schools. And as I was scanning the crowd, I was fortunate to see we have our principal for Cainhoy Elementary School, Ms. Glears, in the audience. And there are several programs and initiatives that she is trying to implement, and we strongly support that. And we know that the growth isn't just coming, it's coming along that entire corridor.
Right.
And so we're talking Point Hope now, but it's coming along that entire corridor. And so we definitely understand that there will be a need in that area as well.
All right. Marie, I kind of touched on it with Johnny a little bit earlier about kind of the jurisdictional I don't know how to describe it and be nice about it, but it just seems like it's the city of Charleston or it's the county, and just talk about the jurisdictional overlap between those two entities and kind of how it helps, and then maybe how it kind of hurts things, just the general services of that area.
Right. It does get confusing. It does get confusing as far as who does what, kind of that, who's on first. And what's very unique about the city of Charleston is it crosses 2 counties. My district spanned 2 counties, and Mount Pleasant cut right through the middle of it. So there's a lot of challenges to navigate in that, and it's not just city of Charleston and Berkeley County. We see this everywhere. One of the things that I was very adamant about was communication. Maybe sometimes I bother Johnny too much. And Josh Whitley. But to just try to have a consensus of what all of us are trying to accomplish. The city might have differing goals than the county, than DOT, et cetera, but to keep these lines of communication open and so we can come to some sort of consensus and make the next right step for what needs to happen. And there's some interesting little hiccups in Cainhoy that continue to try to be worked through, and I just always come back to that. Sometimes it gets very challenging. People tend to get territorial, and the way that our geography is set up, we just simply cannot do that. I can't just, dig my heels in the ground for the city of Charleston. I have to look at the county's interest and the state's interest and our school's interest and figure out how we put all these pieces of the puzzle together.
All right. Fred, I know you were moved back here in the early 80s, and just talk about, you're going to have 11,000 new homes that are moving in to your neighborhood, and how this is going to affect the Jack Primus and Hugie areas and some of the settlement communities around here, because you very astutely pointed out to me one time, you don't want to be too far away from a Lowe's, but you don't want to be too close to one either. And how is this going to affect you guys in the Jack Primus and Hugie communities?
Yes, our area, everybody have seen the explosion of development, and we have a history when these development take places. Our community, traditional community, is somewhat displaced. So we are somewhat intimidated by all the growth and wanting to maintain our community, our culture, our way of life. But we face reality is that opportunity of playing football on Clements Ferry Road is far behind us. That's not going to happen. So we as a community, we work hard to try and adjust to the development that will take place. At the same time, we have to be diligent at the council meeting, whether it's the city of Charleston or Berkeley County. And I think Maria spoke to it clearly when we talk about collaborating between the county and the city. And we see the city of Charleston having high density near the Mark Clark, which is good. That's a part of planning. You put your high density near the expressway. But we go up 41 and we see high density 13 miles away. So the impact on Clements Ferry Road is going to be great when you have that type of density and that far from the Mark Clark. And we see in our areas, all residential being in place. I was at Charleston City Council meeting last Monday protesting the rezoning of residential property, rezoning of commercial property to residential. We need more commercial property in our area, less residential property. Commercial property, keep my car off the highway. Commercial property, find job opportunity right in the community where you don't have to leave. And at this juncture, all the property, available property is being dedicated to residential property, and that's not a good thing for the area. I welcome the fact that I have a place on right 2 minutes from me where I could take my lawnmower and have it replaced. That's a good thing. I have a hardware store down the street. That's a good thing. But when we allow, as mentioned, 7,000 permit being issued, and all those permits is basically residential, what does that do to the impact on Clements Ferry Road? We may have 4 lanes in the near future, but I believe that 4 lane is already outdated. I don't know if the traffic study has been done, but we need to look down the road, and we have to start planning now for other alternatives. But all through the development, and as far as our major concern is that a quality of life consistent with what we are accustomed to must be given some attention. And traveling on Clements Ferry Road, years ago we had to go almost an hour to get to the airport. Well, history is probably repeating itself. When the Mark clock was first built, we could get to the airport in about 12 minutes. I can't get there 12 minutes now. So maybe we're going back to the hour to get to the airport. So I don't want to take up all the time. So,
you know, Johnny, one of the things that I think gets talked about a lot is quality of life. And so how does, as the county, how can you balance the infrastructure needs that obviously the growing population needs with keeping that quality of life?
That's an easy question. When it comes to growth, and nobody wants to, I say this all the time, nobody wants to hear the current supervisor say, I didn't have anything to do with that development agreement or that development agreement or that development agreement. They just want you to figure out how to fix things. And Fred just said plan for the future while you're fixing things now. That's kind of a big deal. A lot of what we do, we start with thinking about quality of life and we end with thinking about it. At our last council meeting, we unanimously passed an ordinance for a moratorium on planned developments or big developments, larger than, I believe it's 100 acres. And that moratorium just changes the process. It used to be a developer or somebody would come in, they would meet with our staff, they would meet with lots of members of our staff and team. And then ultimately they would provide the framework for something, and then it would go to planning commission, and then it would come to county council, and it may not have the support at all of county council. So now the process will be changed where on the very front end, individuals will have to come to the county. And quality of life, boy, it spans a whole lot of different things. So you got property rights and quality of life and conservation, you got all those different things. And quality of life is going to a school somewhere near you and having good water pressure and not sitting in traffic and all the different things we deal with. So what we're doing a better job of now is thinking of all those things and engaging with all the stakeholders better than we've done before. Cane Bay, for example, was one elementary school and one middle school and one high school ever going to fit all the kids that lived in that community. So it was good enough. It it was good to have one, but goodness, and then the kids are being zoned out, pretty quick, or you're bringing in 40 or 50 trailers with a new school, a relatively new school. And so quality of life, so many different things play in. Like I said, our biggest investment in this region, and that's what most folks are here today, is a third of the total sales tax funds in the entire history of the referendum have gone toward basically a 5-lane road to try to help people get home, to be at dinner together, to get to soccer practice on time, and all of those different things. As we move forward, we do our sales tax program 7 years at a time, and I'm a big fan of that. A lot of people do 15 or 20. It's really hard to predict what the need will be 10 or 12 or 14 years from now in a community. So us doing it 7 years at a time, forces us to be really specific with what projects what we might do. And if we want the voters to vote on it again 7 years from now, we need to do what we said we were going to do. So all of those infrastructure elements play deeply in the quality of life. The biggest question I get asked is, why does the infrastructure go in after the investment? And the only project I can think of that's not the case is Volvo. I mean, Volvo was going to come, Volvo went out there, and there's a doggone freeway that leads from the interstate to Highway 176, and there's a company out there. So it's so well suited with its own interchange and its own infrastructure to support whatever might come in, but that doesn't happen enough. And so when you have these big developments, and Marie said it earlier, everything about Point Hope Plantation will go through the city of Charleston. I mean, all the stormwater, all the permits, all the road requirements, all the everything, water and sewer, it'll all go through the city, and they're a good city and they know what they're doing. So we don't lack confidence in that. But it's just one of those situations to where, one of my jokes all the time is if Deon would quit bringing kids in, we wouldn't have to build houses and bring in industry. But
And if he stops bringing in industry and building houses, then we'll stop having kids.
But then we have to think about what's our part in it. So the whole key up here today, there are different stakeholders, and we got to focus on what's our responsibility and what we can do. And if we do it all well together, we can make it manageable. But growth has found us. I mean, growth is here. And one of our biggest changes coming up is this November, whenever we ask the voters to support our next referendum. We've never had a greenbelt component, and we've never had a dedicated road resurfacing component. It's just been mostly an intersection and capacity. So similar to Charleston's greenbelt component, we're going to ask the voters to consider allocating about 10% a year toward conservation green space, which yields almost $5 million a year that you can go toward that end. Those are funds that we've never had. But here's the other scary thing, and you talk about quality of life. The state gives us, with all the gas tax, we get $300,000 a month, 12 months a year, to go toward resurfacing in the entire county, the largest county in the state of South Carolina, bigger than Rhode Island. So and it costs $300,000 to resurface 1 mile of road. So in our entire county and all the miles of road I mentioned, we can do 12 miles of road a year. So in our next referendum, we're going to allocate a percentage of funds or ask the voters to consider 20 additional miles a year. So now 32 miles a year toward resurfacing. There's a lot of folks that complain about, in Fred's area, there are some people on Clements Ferry Road complaining about traffic congestion. And then there are folks that live off that beaten path complaining about road conditions. They're equally important. We just haven't had the funding going that way. So if you start chewing away at 32 miles a year instead of 12, you can start to make a big difference.
And Deon, I remember talking to somebody on the school board, and they said to keep up with the growth that you guys are anticipating, you're going to have to build one new school every year just to keep up. So what are kind of the short-term and long-term vision or that you guys have for kind of meeting this need that's definitely coming?
One school per year for the next umpteen years, and that started about 5 years ago, and clearly we hadn't kept up with that pace. So we have to fully utilize all of the resources that we currently have. That includes our facilities, that includes our fiscal resources, personnel, et cetera. But there are some areas where we do have some capacity within our school buildings, and where it's feasible, then we do need to make adjustments to ensure that the enrollment aligns with the areas where we have capacity. I think we have to do that first, and that shows a good faith effort, in my opinion, that we're using everything that we have before we are required to make a request to our citizens. But as far as some of the short range adjustments, I'll go to our Cane Bay area. That's one of the more popular areas, more populated areas as well. And unfortunately, we were forced to make some adjustments there. Supervisor Cribb alluded to the cap that's there. And so Cane Bay Middle and Cane Bay Elementary School, there's a hard enrollment cap. Cane Bay Elementary is capped at 1,250 students. First of all, that's a lot of elementary students to be on one campus.
Yeah.
That 1,250 includes mobile units. Cane Bay Middle, they will now be capped at 1,475 students. Again, that's up from 1,400 where they were last year. Have a brand new addition at Cane Bay Middle, and we also kept the mobile units, and so we can increase that capacity to 1,475 students, which is still a pretty large middle school. Students that are 1476 and beyond, those students will be enrolled at a nearby middle school, and we provide transportation for that. And that's just one of the things that one of the strategies that we're using. In addition, in our Moncks Corner area, we have more capacity in our north area as opposed to some of the more populated areas. And so we made an adjustment to attendance lines there as well, because those schools, they're sitting at around 60% capacity, and the enrollment forecast for the next 5, 7, 10 years have their enrollment relatively stagnant, at least at this particular point in time. So there's capacity at those schools. Now, in the long run, absolutely, we will need to add to our inventory, add additional schools to our inventory. We have a school that's under construction now in our Carnes Crossroads area, the Carolyn Lewis School. That school will house students in grades pre-kindergarten through 8th grade. It's going to be great. It's it's our first prototype model for our kindergarten through 8th grade schools. Scheduled to have our ribbon cutting 2023. And so that project is moving along very well. We're building that school using the debt service capacity that we already have. And so our debt service is capped at, self-imposed cap at 70 mils, and we're building that school based on the funding that we already have. Now, do we have the capacity, the fiscal capacity to keep up with the construction that you were mentioning? Not really.
Right.
And so we'll have to depend on other funding mechanisms for that. And so there's some traditional funding mechanisms. We have our 8% capacity. We have you have the bond referendum, which is probably the most familiar for school districts. And now Supervisor Cribb mentioned the penny. Fortunately, because of our growth, we're at the point now where in Berkeley County, the school district could also petition for a penny, and that's been something that our school board has been discussing for at least the past 18 to 24 months, and there may be a decision to request that on actually this November's ballot as well. And so we're still exploring that possibility, and so I think the citizens will hear more about that in the future.
Just out of curiosity, what does a new school cost now? And then what is the developer, what's their input? Do they have to give any money towards a school, and how are they involved?
That's a great question. I'll cover the cost first. So elementary schools, we're looking at around $35 million. These are hard costs, just hard costs, construction. It's not including the furniture, finishings, and equipment, just hard costs. So $35 million. The K-8 school, we're looking at about $53 million by the time it's all said and done. And the high school, we're looking now at about $100 million for a high school.
Wow.
Yeah. The developers, great question. And I'm going to steal Supervisor Cribb's line, or maybe he wouldn't have to say it because I'm here. Previously, in one of our building programs, we engaged with some agreements with the developers, and it was mutually beneficial because we got a school out of it and they have a school out of it. But the level to which we benefited versus the level to which the developer benefited, that's disputable. I don't think it was even. It definitely wasn't par. And so we've learned a lot. Mr. Lincoln mentioned, preparing for the future while fixing what you have now. And so we've learned a lot, and we're putting those lessons in place now. And we definitely have a better relationship with our county government and our local municipalities. And so when there are developments that are proposed, we, in essence, have a seat at the table to discuss what would be the impact to the school district, what is the enrollment situation at that school, what's needed in that area if this development were to be approved. In addition, we've become a little bit more savvy as it relates to engaging with the developers. And so our ask for a mega development, we wouldn't be, we forecast the student yield. And so for Cane Bay, for example, the student yield is 0.97 students per household. And so I don't know if anyone's ever seen a 0.97th of a student. So basically that's one student per household. That includes all of those residential dwellings to include Del Webb. And so anyone knows about Del Webb, they don't have students that reside in Del Webb. And so that's thousands of units that don't have students, but it's still a 0.97 student yield per household. So in short,
Yeah, no.
we need more than one elementary school, one middle school.
Right.
And one high school may do it.
Any projections for Cainhoy about how many students that they're going to have per house?
For the time being, that area, I think it's about 0.67
Right.
students per residential unit. However, by the time it's all said and done, because of there are great schools in that area, we anticipate that it will be closer to that 0.87 mark or 0.8. But we're already working with the developer to identify potential school sites in the event that we need, when that situation comes where we need additional school sites.
Gotcha. All right. Marie, one of the things that you and I talked about was the identity of Cainhoy. There's this Instagram, and Charleston, actually, there's this Instagram image that you have of Charleston and Cainhoy and what, you see on there, and the idyllic, the mossy oaks and everything. And then there's the real Cainhoy and what people there are. And just talk to me about the identity of Cainhoy, kind of the separation between what people see on Instagram, what they see out there in ads and whatever, and what it's really like, and what you think about that.
I do. I think that throughout the region, there's a disconnect between how we are portrayed out there versus how those of us in here are living and our experience. And so kind of how do we, like my friend Peter is sitting here, and so, both of us are in the marketing PR space, and it's like, people will come to us and say, like, I need public relations. Well, why do you think you need public relations? What are you trying to accomplish? What's the end game? What do you want to be? What are you trying to achieve? And then we kind of reverse engineer out of that how we're going to get you there. And we need to know where you are now, and we need to know where you want to be, and then we start drawing some pretty definitive ways to get there. I see a lot of disconnect in the region, where, I joked with Andrew, I'm like, we have all this like very Instagram worthy photography of, of course, Daniel Island and downtown and all the areas around. We're not seeing pictures of traffic and cranes and all of those things. And we need to get very honest and very, what is our intention? And then be very intentional. And that's going to involve probably some really uncomfortable conversations, because we have to get very serious about where we are now, and we need to get very specific about where we want to be. how many people do we want living in Cainhoy, and zone and build for that number, as opposed to we kind of take it as it comes. A little bit more strategy, and like I said, a little bit more intention, with this end goal in mind of this is who we are. This is what this community is, this is what it represents, and all of our decisions are going to be made to feed into that. When we do branding exercises, who are you? What do you want to be known for? What do you want your reputation to be? Your relationship, and we build from that. How we craft everything, how we create your infrastructure. You know, a lot of times we're doing that for a business, but it's the same thing when we're doing it for our communities. And I think we need to get very, very in the weeds about that. You know, talking about the young man who played football down Clements Ferry. Well, my mom is sitting right there. She used to take me down Clements Ferry to teach me how to drive, because there were no cars out there, and Lord knows I needed as much free space as possible when I was learning how to drive. And so a lot of times we're like, you know, oh, the way Charleston used to be, you know, back in the good old days. And we hold on to that nostalgia, and there's a lot there that we need to take forward with us. We're in this moment right now because of every single moment that has come before. And growth isn't necessarily bad. Many of you in this room, maybe you wouldn't even be sitting here today if back when I was a teenager, we had decided we were going to never develop anything else in the Cainhoy area. You wouldn't be raising your families here and working here and being a part of our communities. And we want that. We want our communities to grow and foster. But again, when you have a very clear identity of who you are and what you're trying to build for, then you come out of that and you build for it.
Awesome. Thank you. Fred, I know that you worked with the developer, the Point Hope developer, pretty closely, and you were able to set aside some land, preserve it for a graveyard that was out there. Just talk about your relationship with the Point Hope development people and what you hope is going to kind of be happening here as we move forward and more people move in here.
Yes. What we were concerned about, there was 9,000 acres of land developing a master plan. And one thing we must, and I think Mount Pleasant, that argument came out years ago in Mount Pleasant, if you're a teacher or a firefighter in Mount Pleasant, you could work there, but you couldn't live here. And I know it's true today as it was then. And we'll say, the same thing is going to happen in the Cainhoy area. You will be able to work there, but will you be able to live there? And on the school teacher salary, they're not building subdivision catering around that salary. What we propose in this development, that 10% of the property being developed, 10% should have been set aside for low-income housing. Low-income housing, what we consider low-income housing, that would have included mobile homes also. We cannot have mobile homes on the school ground, but no mobile home in the community. Doesn't look right. If we have a salary structure in the state of South Carolina that borders around the minimum wage, where are those people going to live? if we don't plan for them doing doing the development of the master plan. And we tried to get the 10% of the property. And we weren't successful, but we were able to get 150 acres zone that you could place a mobile home on those property. And it's just not a mobile home. You could build smaller homes that would be affordable for workers, South Carolina workers. I look at places like Daniels Island. I don't find any southern accents over there. And there's a reason. Daniels Island is based on New York, New Jersey salary, not based on South Carolina salary. And we've seen the same thing repeat itself along Clements Ferry Road and the 9,000 acre development. So we tried to think outside the box and see if we could have come up with a strategy that would provide housing for people, working folks, making $3 above the minimum wage. And we got the 150 acres, but it's just sitting there. At this juncture, it's not profitable for a developer to develop it just by itself. It should have been included in the bigger plan, a small amount in every community, and we would have gotten that 10%. We have worked with the developer, and we had a plan for any development near our community. Those zoning along the perimeter must reflect the zoning of the traditional community. That is, in our community, you're allowed to have 5,000 square foot home, but next door, you could have a mobile home. So we wanted those neighboring property adjacent to our community to mirror our community. And then we could speak to low-income housing. And we would have people owning housing instead of just renting. We wanted to make sure that there were property owners, proud property owners, and that builds strong community.
Thank you, Fred. Well, I know you guys didn't come here to hear me ask all the questions. I want to open it up to you guys out there, and if you've got any questions for any of our panelists, now is the time. Just raise your hand, and we'll bring you a mic.
Supervisor Cribb, you mentioned, I think we can currently pave 12 miles a year in Berkeley County, and we're hoping to get to 32. And there were over 1,000 miles of road, if I recall. What is the life of the paved road?
And that 32 miles is just the county. The state still does a significant amount of mileage in the county, so they might do 10 or 12 more years. But the life of a road varies. There are some interior residential roads that are 35, 40 years old, and they haven't been resurfaced because the traffic count is such, and heck, they probably built it better back then. I'm not sure. But speaking of this community, we just got good news that DOT is going to pave the road from Clements Ferry Road to Newcore. And it is just beat to death, that road. Anywhere you've got roads where there's a lot of big trucks starting and stopping and putting on brakes and all that good, it wears out a heck of a lot sooner. So depending on traffic count, traffic volume, and what type vehicles are on a road, some people get upset every now and again because they'll see a road get resurfaced 9 years later, and they'll call and say, mine hasn't been resurfaced in 20 years, and they're talking about an interior road that leads to 10 or 12 houses versus the major thoroughfare that got thousands of people home. So basically, it depends. And with the limited amount of funds, and let me tell you, Facebook and everything else, we better not go out and fix a road and somebody can send us a picture of 5 more worse than that one with the same conditions. So it's really been good for government, how we evaluate all these roads and which ones we do. But it depends on traffic count and the types of vehicles.
With respect to the future climate factors, do you design for the low end of the flooding or the mid-range or the high end of the flooding scale?
Is that for me, sir? We One of the unfunded mandates that came down from the federal government a little while back was the stormwater regulations that came down, and everybody's doing it. We just amended our stormwater manual to make it a lot more rigorous, but you know, we used to hear 1,000-year storm, and to the normal person, they would go, oh, that storm happens once every 1,000 years, and the people don't use that term anymore because we kept having these 1,000-year storms. And the system was developed for a 10-year storm or a 25-year storm. So we just met as a council with and passed for our stormwater manual to increase the regulations based on what we've been seeing, meaning the amount of water you have to detain or hold on to without it getting into the system. So we increased those standards. The one thing we're finding, and developers will get upset from time to time because those regulations are what they are, pipes and ponds and all that. But whenever we have gotten some of this historical flooding that we've gotten, a lot of the older, more established neighborhoods have gotten flooded to a significantly greater degree than the newer communities that have gone in, which means the systems are working. So as expensive as it was to put it in and all the red tape you had to cut through, it actually works. The problem becomes who's maintaining the system, because sediment most certainly gets in there and builds up pretty quick. So we actually have an entire stormwater department with folks that check job sites every single day for silt fencing and you name it. But they also go out and evaluate impaired water bodies in areas where we've got flooding or detention ponds that have too much buildup and they need to be dug out. So we have a whole team of folks that are in tune with that and stay on top of it. And we will continue to change the regulations based on the conditions that we're seeing.
Marie, you wanted to add something?
And similar to Berkeley County, the city of Charleston also has a stormwater division. And part of your permitting process, part of the TRC, Technical Review Committee process, is stormwater. And there are specific stormwater requirements that you have to meet depending on your property and what you're doing there and things like that and the elevation of it. So all of those things are factored in, and a lot of times they do wind up having to be revised as we get new guidelines from FEMA and things like that. So it's an ever-evolving process. And I will say that the city of Charleston has a very stringent stormwater process that frustrates a lot of people. And you know, and there's times that it's really good, and there's times that, you know, maybe we can't go exactly by the book. It works in the lab, but it's not going to work in real life given the topography of the site. So it's figuring out really what's going to be best in that specific situation.
Continuing on the flooding topic, we've seen places like the Phillips community nearby here in Mount Pleasant dealing with flooding issues as Park West and Dunes West built around it, built up higher, and then this community that didn't historically flood started flooding. We've seen that on Johns Island. This Cainhoy development proposes thousands of new houses right up to the edge of places like Jack Primus and Yuji, but it also proposes thousands of new houses in the floodplain at the same time while the city is also working with the Army Corps to spend billions of dollars to build a flood wall around the peninsula. Do you all, any of you, do you think this is even the right place to be putting thousands of new people in a place that's susceptible to flooding, places that will put a bunch of density right up to historic homes, historic communities that could provide even more threats to drainage and runoff issues in the neighborhoods that aren't currently even being impacted by flooding at this time?
We had an issue surrounding the Jack Promise community where the developer had applied for through the Corps of Engineers to fill in some wetland, and we were concerned that we would have the same problem that Phillip community had. Once you fill in those wetlands, now where does the water go? The water runs into the neighboring community. So we engaged the Corps of Engineer, and it hasn't been resolved, but it's something that we are paying attention to, because if they build up on one area, you can flood you out in the other area.
And I think too, a lot depends on how those homes, those sites are going to be situated. Are you going to build, kind of draw more of that density toward Clements Ferry Road, and then you kind of feather it out as you go back? Clusters of homes, so you're taking up less green space, less roads that have to be paved, things like that. And a lot of this goes back to our zoning, and being very proactive in how we zone and approve, development agreements, et cetera. I'll be really honest. I can look at some things. I think all of us can, like, things that happened years ago, and it's like, wow, why would they do that? Why did somebody think that was okay? But we are where we are right now, and we have to figure out what's the best course moving forward. And so I think if we look at some of those different ways in which a landowner can still do what by right they're allowed to do, but in a more strategic and intentional manner, that would be our goal. I like to see more density along the Clements Ferry corridor and not as much as you go back, for those reasons I stated. It's less roads being paved, it's less land being developed. Also, what that helps with is if we can get that density closer to the corridor, we can then start to have conversations about mass transit. The numbers need to work in order for mass transit to start to come to Cainhoy. We cannot keep adding lanes to roads. We can add all the lanes in the world. It's not gonna solve our problems. We need to start to think multimodal transportation and how to get people to move through the area in a variety of ways, as opposed to what we rely mainly on in this region, which is single occupant vehicle. And obviously the more spread out our development is, we see this a lot in Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant's very spread out. People have to drive long distances. So you're on the road that much longer. We've got to pave that many more roads. Again, it's not the smartest approach and the most sustainable approach to take.
I'll talk about the flooding component and also grow on a few other things. We meet with developers quite often, and oftentimes we don't tell them what they want to hear, and sometimes that results in threatening to be sued. So recently we had a parcel that required a rezoning, thank goodness, because the conditions around that parcel were heavy traffic and heavy flooding, and we had been spending a great deal of money to address the flooding. So we basically told the developer, no, we're not going to rezone the parcel for that use because it flies in the face of the zone of the flooding and the traffic in that area. So we're always hopeful that any of these developments, if it involves a rezoning of some time, we have all kind of leverage, and you got to know that corridor and you got to know that region. It might be buffering. It might be the minimum requirement is a 50-foot buffer, but because of the sensitivity of that region and that community, and this would be one, you may require buffering to a far greater extent than that. Or if flooding is an issue, you may require the detention ponds and things like that to be far greater than the minimum requirement, because you have that kind of leverage, and you need to be willing to use that kind of leverage. And it plays for everything else, and I'll go back to some other subjects. I jokingly say with council, I haven't done a big development agreement since I've been at the county. I've been a part of executing some that are in place, and I oftentimes say I wish I could blow them all up, all the current development agreements, because we've learned a lot. I'm not even being critical of the folks there before me. We've just learned a lot. And in these development agreements, drainage isn't well thought out. It isn't thought out enough. Imagine having to pay a developer for right-of-way so you can widen the road so his folks can get home. I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow when you got to pay for right-of-way. Or asking for land for a water tower so you can have adequate water pressure. Or asking for land for a school. And Deon will tell you, you better not just accept any piece of land they tell you they will give you, or else you'll spend more in mucking and filling than you could have just buying the land outright, or making sure that you get enough. You need fire protection, and it wasn't thought of or contemplated within the development agreement. And you just got to hope that they play ball, and thankfully a lot of developers do, even when it's not required. But in Cane Bay, for example, there was no assessment fee for a fire station. So they had a little piece of land, but they had to pay for the fire station, a volunteer fire department. They don't even have the funds to pay the firefighter, but they got a $3 million fire station. But in Nexton, there's an assessment fee that pays in full the cost of the fire department, spread out over 11,000 different owners. And they're all happy that they're going to have a paid for, stood up fire department. So there's, and parks and paths. The good thing is a lot of developers they're passionate about paths anymore. They put them in because they think it works for them. And they're turning these ponds into being much bigger than even the minimum requirement because they're developing this lake system so folks can go kayaking and canoeing. But you got to know the area that something's going in. If it's a rezoning process, you have a lot of leverage to make things a lot more stringent. But you better make sure your minimum code is caught up, because sometimes by right zoning is there. And if by right zoning is there, you better make sure your water detention and your buffering and all those other things that are important to you are even in the code with by right development. So we've tried to attack it from both ends.
Well, thank you, Johnny, Deon, Marie, and Fred for joining us today. I thought it was a very good discussion. What y'all think? Thank you, Andrew, for moderating. I almost feel like we can do another one of these of just lessons learned and invite members from all across the region, because I think we could all benefit from understanding that, so that we can ask the questions and advocate for that. So thank you. I also want to thank our sponsor today, Gerard, Noel, and Russell. Thank you, Will, for joining us. Thank y'all. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you want to read more about our Boom and Balance series, you can do so at postandcourier.com/Boom and Balance. Again, it's an occasional series. We talk about these issues. If there's specific ideas that you would like to hear more about from an event series, please see one of us. We'll be happy to explore it. Again, we'll make the recording available in a couple of days. Feel free to share that out. But we appreciate everybody being here today, so thank you so much.